May I now request Ambassador Iskantayal, who was India's former ambassador to Uzbekistan and who has been commenting through his writings in newspapers, journals, and his appearances on number of roundtables to share his perspective on the democratic processes, ongoing democratic processes in Uzbekistan. Ambassador Iskantayal.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ramakanji, and I am honored to be on this very distinguished panel headed by Honorable Excellency, our colleague, Ambassador of Uzbekistan, and with my other colleagues as well as from the academic world, my colleagues. I have also had the privilege of being observer in various elections in Uzbekistan. I think this was the fourth or fifth time I was also there. And I have seen the evolution of democratic processes, election processes, how they are conducted, and all very positive changes. I think the participation of the public in the canvassing process, pre-election process, has increased tremendously, particularly after President Mirziyoyev came to power. This time I saw some public rallies where hundreds of people were there, and a candidate was talking and they were shouting and clapping, which I had not seen earlier. Also, now there are about more than 30 TV channels, which are private TV channels, and they telecast without any censorship. They are just telecasting whatever they want to telecast. And I was had the privilege to see a debate. I was told that this is the first time this is happening in an election process in Uzbekistan, and that live telecast, 5 candidates were there of all 5 political parties, and the anchor, Mr. Shardod Khojaev, was asking questions, and the public was also asking questions, and it was being telecast live. And I was told that this was perhaps the 4 or 5 times that kind of debate took place on different subjects, ecology or health, and issues of very direct concern to the masses, to the voters. I think that is very, very important, public participation in this process of election of their representatives. As Ambassador Sharma and Professor Pandey have very eloquently put, Parliament has a very important role. It is the interface between the electorate, the people, and the powers that rule the people, president, entire cabinet of ministers, and executive. And this is a conveyor belt which allows the president and the ministers to know the pulse of the people, what are their real priorities, grievances, and response. Then some other things which caught my attention were that the voting percentage was 75%. That shows that the electorate was under no compulsion. We have seen so-called democratic countries with 99% vote. 99%. Really with the warning flag. And normally if you see globally, the democratic, the voting percentage varies between 60, 70, sometimes 50, 70. So that is a very normal percentage of voting. And that is another signal that Uzbekistan has moved to a normal democratic process. Then another fact got my attention, that this party, which is supposed to be President's party, Liberal Democratic Party,
and Prime Minister Arifov is also from there, got 35%. That also shows that people were under no compulsion and they voted as per their own priorities. The people
who were supporting or more concerned about environmental issues, they voted for that party. Justice, Adalat party. So people were free to exercise their choice as per their own priorities. I think that is a very, very good sign, very healthy sign, and that democracy has taken very deep roots in our friendly country Uzbekistan. Of course, 40% women candidates. So we have to learn something from Uzbekistan. We have, of course, done that in our panchayat grassroots level. We have 33% reservation, minimum 33. That in some states have 50% also. But we all wait to see the day when in our own parliament we'll have at least 33%, if not 40%. Then this proportional representation system is also very interesting, as Professor Pandey pointed out, because there are lots of people who are very useful in articulating the people's views and be helpful in policy making, but they are not ready to be part of the electoral process. So the political parties get an opportunity to tap such skilled people, such professionals, and who can go to the parliament and Ali Majlis in this case, with and contribute to nation building without going through the hassles of the elections. As in India, we have the Raj Sabha route that is followed for this. Now, of course, as an observer, I must thank the Election Commission of Uzbekistan for being very generous hosts, and we were looked after very well. Whatever, any polling booth we wanted to visit, any city we wanted to visit, it was all immediately arranged, and it allowed. I went to Tarmez this time and saw the international free trade. I have written on that, and perhaps some people would have read that. Then there was a roundtable on Uzbekistan's foreign policy towards peace, openness, and development. I think, Professor, you were there. And so another opportunity was given to the observers to not only see the election process, but how the foreign policy of Uzbekistan is moving, how it is independent, how Uzbekistan, I'm a great admirer of how Uzbekistan is exercising fully its strategic autonomy, and on matters like how the world deals with Afghanistan, Uzbekistan has taken the lead. And in my article which I wrote for Vivekananda International Foundation, I have said that India should closely coordinate its Afghanistan policy with Uzbekistan. So there are many advantages of Uzbekistan inviting election observers in such large numbers, which is not the practice in many countries. They invite observers, but not in such large numbers. It helps the observers to understand, appreciate, admire the changes which are happening in Uzbekistan, positive changes. Every time we go, we see new buildings, new institutions, and Ambassador Sharma mentioned so many directions in which Uzbekistan is progressing. Another direction is higher education. That earlier I was told less than 10% of high school students used to go for higher education. Now more than 30% are in higher education. But of course, the question which faces both government of Uzbekistan, government of India, policymakers is how to find good employment for these educated youths. On this, we can work together. So these are my observations, and thank you very much once again to Professor Ramakant and Ambassador for organizing this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable comments on the democratic process in Uzbekistan. May I now invite Professor Archana Upadhyay. She is the chairperson, Center for Russian and Central Asian Studies, School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. She has been one of the election observers in the recently concluded parliamentary elections on October 27th, 2024. So, ma'am, all yours to share your perspective.
So, very good afternoon to all of you. At the outset, I would like to congratulate the Center for International Studies for organizing this very important roundtable on the recently concluded elections in Uzbekistan, and for inviting me to share my impressions of this beautiful country that I visited for the first time, and it's my first experience as an international observer. So what I have to say perhaps would be a little different from most of you, because I believe many of you have been there several times as an observer. Well, first and foremost, I am honored to be a part of this August panel, and it's very enlightening to listen to the multiple perspectives that I've heard so far. So, Excellencies, colleagues, and Professor Dwivedi and Professor Agarwal, thank you for inviting me here. I begin by saying that the year 2024 has been a year of elections, as pointed out by so many speakers before me, and also the ambassador of Uzbekistan. And some of these elections have been very keenly watched internationally, both with interest and apprehension. Why I say interest and apprehension? Because the outcome of these elections actually have been such that it's beyond the borders of the country. The impact and the implications of the outcome of these elections, in fact, are being felt globally. In fact, the presidential elections in Russia that took place in the early part of this year, the general elections in India in the middle of this year, and the recently concluded US presidential elections have been the much talked about elections of 2024. Of course, there have been other very important elections too, also in Europe, European Union, etc. But amidst the noise and din of some of these very high-profile elections, the recently concluded parliamentary elections and the local council elections in Uzbekistan on 27th October 2024 clearly stands out. Now, why do I say it stands out? And in what sense? Well, the impression that I got was that it was a purposeful electoral journey, rather a purposeful electoral exercise geared towards a transformative journey of building what we understand as Naya Uzbekistan. And in a sense, it was the continuation of the very bold reforms that have been put in place in the last few years. So in that sense, this particular election was not an election that randomly happened, but it had an objective, a goal, and a purpose. And that's why I say it stands out. And we all know that reforms are not easy. We know what happened to the Soviet Union, perestroika and glasnost, if you look at it. So reforms are never easy. It has to be introduced in phases if some concrete results are to be achieved. And you have to carry your people along. It cannot always be imposed from the top. And that's when elections become extremely important, and also referendums. So it is beyond doubt, as Professor Pandey pointed out, that elections are the most visible symbols of democratic processes anywhere in the world. And it is a fundamental component of democratic societies. And it is critical to representative governance. Hence we see, despite the challenges involved, visionary leaders, even in societies that historically do not have experience of democracy in the conventional sense, have gone to great lengths to support transformative reforms. And yes, electoral reforms are a vital component of these transformative reforms. So in that sense, I view the 2024 elections in Uzbekistan as path-breaking. And it has to be understood in the context of the significance of this election in the future of democratic consolidation in the country. So now what is so unique about these elections? Well, as several speakers have pointed out, that the election took place under the revised electoral code that introduced the mixed electoral system in the country, and the system has its own advantages, which Ambassador Tayal pointed out. But what is increasingly apparent, and what was increasingly apparent in the sense that what I observed was that the political landscape of the country is fast changing. In what sense? Political parties now have to engage with a young and aspirational electorate, given the demographic profile of the country. A huge young population. And this particular population is very aspirational. They have their goals, their ambitions, and that makes it tougher for political parties because you have to engage with an informed young population, the youth of your country. And this population, or this component of the population, which is big, huge, and is increasing, see themselves as stakeholders and partners in the ongoing transformation. They are no longer passive voters or passive recipients of what is served from the top. So not only are the citizens better informed, even the general citizens, about the issues that impact them on a day-to-day basis, but they seek some kind of a proactive public engagement with their lawmakers, or for that matter, their potential lawmakers, because when you talk about election campaigning and the people who were seeking votes from the electorate. So this actually has to be seen as a major transformation in the political landscape of Uzbekistan. And yes, we all know that these elections were fueled by the vision of Uzbekistan 2020-2030 strategy and has to be seen as a part and parcel of the larger political and constitutional reform process that are underway. What is particularly striking is that the aim is to modernize the governance structure of Uzbekistan. And this automatically means to come up with an inclusive and participatory political model. Create an ecosystem that is both inclusive and participatory. And it's here in this context, this historical move of having 40% reservation for women or representation for women in the legislature, the so-called gender quota as it is called, which is very, very important because I believe that it is going to be a game changer in every sense, especially when it comes to addressing the social issues confronting the country. Traditional societies, patriarchal societies have a lot of social issues. So greater visibility of women in public life, in parliament, outside parliament, in every sector of life is going to bring about a kind of transformation which would be historic in every sense. And yes, as some speakers pointed out, that India has to learn. India certainly has to learn. Especially our menfolk have to learn because the resistance is from them. So, and yes, coming to the management of the election, I feel that it was amazing in every sense, especially when it comes to the polling booths. We see the presence, heavy presence of women in the management of elections and also as candidates in the elections. And most certainly, wherever you looked around, in the streets, in the bazaars, wherever, women were visible in big numbers. So when you see women in big numbers in public spaces, it's an indication that the country, the society has arrived. And what are my impressions? Well, certainly, what I sensed was that a dynamic, competitive political environment is fast emerging in Uzbekistan. And we all know, rather we all acknowledge that democracy for its sustenance requires substantial consensus on liberal and democratic values. And what are these values? These values include the diffusion of political power in the society at large through inclusive processes, guaranteed minority rights, and a legal system capable of defending these rights. Now, the ongoing reforms in Uzbekistan has endeavored to address the weaknesses that have plagued transitional societies in most of the post-Soviet space. Now, what are these weaknesses? I'm not talking about Uzbekistan in particular. I'm talking about the transitional societies. Most of the transitional countries, most of the countries in the post-Soviet space are still going through the process of transition. And what are these weaknesses? One certainly is the weakness of law. So the vision statement, the 2020-30 vision statement of Uzbekistan, again and again emphasizes on rule of law. The idea is to address the weakness of law. The second is the underdeveloped institutional settings. And the third is the limited or qualified commitment to democratic values. In general, I'm talking about transitional societies. Now, in conclusion, I would like to say that social change, like biological change, occurs in an evolutionary fashion. And a deeper and more lasting change in any political system requires a longer period in which new people are brought into the political arena. I emphasize on this. New interests arise and organize, and new structures arise to meet these new needs. And this precisely is what the reforms aim at. So it's very, very evident to anybody who has been closely watching the developments in Uzbekistan that Uzbekistan has charted a course of progress for itself, and there is no going back on it. Huge risks have been taken, but then it is worth it because it's actually going to lay the foundation. In fact, it is laying the foundation of what is going to be Naya Uzbekistan. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Upadhyay. In the cultural and historical context, it does influence the trajectory of democratization in any country. And therefore, this evolutionary democracy in Uzbekistan is a step forward, very positive. Now I request Ambassador Gitesh Sharma, who was our ambassador in Uzbekistan, who was Secretary West, looking after more than 55 countries. Currently, he is the Vice President of India Central Asia Foundation. He was one of the international observers. We traveled together to Romitan district of Bukhara, and out of the 5 polling booths we visited, 3 were headed by the women. I have got their names written. Polling booth number 350 in Romitan district, 50 in Bukhara city, and Madam Karimova was at both the places. So over to Ambassador Gitesh Sharma.
Very good afternoon, and absolute pleasure to be part of a group which loves Uzbekistan. This is for our ambassador Rustam Bhai. Many of us have been long in the business, and one thing which unites us is we simply love the region and love Uzbekistan. And it gave me, I was a little, maybe I felt a little underprepared initially while being part of this observer group, because I had never really done this kind of work. Maybe in Fiji I had been a part of some group, but to go to Uzbekistan in this way, in this capacity, I think that was something which I had a very open kind of mind. And in the end, I think I took the right decision, and it was very rewarding. I think the first country I ever saw in my life was Uzbekistan. My plane in '87 had landed in Uzbekistan. So I think every few years I have had a chance to visit Tashkent in some way, Uzbekistan in some way or the other. So what you see on the ground, what you see through the window, the people you meet, that is something which leaves lasting impression, sometimes more important than what you read. You get a very live kind of impression. One of the things I noted even before we set out, how digital the elections were. E-Silo, for instance, they were digital, and I couldn't believe it. And we made some kind of error in filling our forms, and it was quickly corrected, and we were on the plane so, and everywhere everything was meticulously done. So it's amazing kind of organizational skills of the silo system, and I congratulate Uzbek authorities on this. It was totally transparent elections, and there was no restriction on going anywhere you wanted. I mean, it was not conducted, not directed. We were free to go and visit any booth anytime, and that is shows a country which is very confident, which is absolutely confident that it has nothing to hide. So I think that was an impression that stood out, and of course the women aspect is always any society where women get importance is a healthy society. I think straight away we can say the general indicators and the political kind of standing, that all is related to how women are treated. And I was very impressed, not only in the booths but in the electoral process, and I saw a lot of pictures also in different places like traditional elections elsewhere, and I could see pictures of women, so that made me feel good. And each of us has repeated that 40% has to be reserved for women, and that's something that other countries will look to emulate and learn from Uzbekistan's experience. I think much has been said today, which probably covers the ambassador himself, Ambassador Rustambai himself, gave the statistics and the other details on the election. I am taking the liberty of touching on something else, that we may sometimes not realize the magnitude of these elections unless we know about the backdrop or keep in mind the backdrop. Of course, each one of us does know the backdrop, but the context and the setting in which Uzbekistan is growing as a nation, I think that we need to put it together. I think Ambassador Tal and myself, we were in USSR when the USSR forces withdrew from Afghanistan 1989. See, Uzbekistan is such a geographically vital country, not only for itself, but for the rest of the world. What happens in Uzbekistan matters to the entire world. So in 89, when USSR forces withdrew, I mean, look at the kind of spotlight, attention, what would happen. I think these were subject of discussions in 89. And again, more recently, when the US troops withdrew, right? Again, what would happen, how it would spill over. And, the Uzbekistan is a country, frontline country. The whole world is interested in the region, but let's put the spotlight on Uzbekistan, that it has to stand and meet the expectations of the rest of the world. That the spread of extremism, radicalization, of young people, these are things which were drug trafficking. So these are real issues, and the rest of the world is, sort of concerned maybe as a theory, but for Uzbek it's a daily problem. For the Uzbek is people crossing the border or sending across either radical material. So these kind of things is a constant theme. So this is one. This is not the only thing. I mean, when I talk of impressions, that Uzbekistan had a unique, or many of these Soviet republics had a unique kind of historical experience which we sometimes don't sufficiently, give importance. Everything happened in one go. See, a centralized, one country broke up in 91. The centralized system of governance broke away one day. The centralized economy broke up. How many things can you handle? You can handle one thing, two things, three things. But here is Uzbekistan, right at the center of geopolitics, trying to deal with everything, and they have emerged very successfully through all these challenges. And I think we owe Uzbekistan gratitude, because regional developments are so connected with what happens in, don't forget 9/11 was traced to Afghanistan, and so it's not that it's only in the region, it has a global kind of consequence. The other aspect was, one sees, one talked about ecology, and in various ways, Uzbekistan bore the brunt of it. I've been to Aral Sea, and it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy. And when you see there, when you tamper with nature, the river waters are drained, and it's just dust bowl there. So Uzbekistan, therefore, is hosts on its territory one of the world's biggest ecological disasters. They have to contend with that as well. And one more dimension is cotton. While everyone talks about Uzbekistan's cotton, but a kind of monoculture type of Uzbekistan. All you allow Uzbekistan to do is grow cotton, but there's traditional agriculture also, which is meaningful. I mean, if you take into account local conditions and the needs of the people. So when you look at the streets of Tashkent or Bukhara or any other place, you see more Uzbek products. And I hate to use to refer to automobiles because it has a double impact. Certainly, it was very nice to see lots of Uzbek-made automobiles. Lots of Uzbek-made automobiles I saw. But at the same time, I have sort of, as a person who would see Uzbekistan as his second home, would find the second home having so much traffic like the first home also. So that is something which I'm sure if Uzbek authorities are so successful in dealing with such challenges, they will deal with this as well. And so that is another issue. And one was a interesting kind of, I met a few young people who spoke only English and Uzbek. There was no Russian, So the way it has evolved, that Uzbek language has got greater kind of feeling of self-respect and dignity without any animosity towards Russian language. I think that's something which we should recognize, that in some, other parts of the former Soviet Union, it has evolved in other ways. While I said about Uzbekistan being a frontline state in relation to Afghanistan, let's not forget it's a frontline state in relation to other Central Asian republics as well. And whatever happens there, that again has a potential to impact on Uzbekistan. But having said that, President Shaukat Mirziyoyev, I think what we read and hear about him, that he has introduced a sense of calm in the region. His approach to the region, the kind of cooperation meetings between the Central Asian leaders. So that is something that I think will not only benefit Uzbekistan, but benefit the whole region, and provide that kind of environment where economic development takes place. So I think that I think would be my broad set of impressions, and I would congratulate Excellency Ambassador, and through you, the Uzbek government, on this very forward-looking, reforms. I would, just say at the end that every country, deserves to be given that space to develop and move forward based on its own historical and cultural experiences. And if you leave Uzbekistan to itself, I think that would be the best course of action. If you judge Uzbekistan on basis of, or try to judge Uzbekistan on the basis of other experiences and other models, I think it may not be right, because as I have said, Uzbekistan has a historical experience or a recent experience of three decades plus, which is, I mean, very few countries would have that kind of historical experience with so many challenges. So all I would say is congratulations.
Thank you very much, sir. Very well said. We have around 10 minutes to wind up our round table. But two points I would like to mention. before I hand over the floor to Dr. Rajkumar. The point mentioned by Ambassador Tayal with respect to the salient point of current Uzbek leadership foreign policy brought out by His Excellency Sadiq Safayev in that meeting, where we see more than 250 international observers were present, that how the current Uzbek leadership has strategized to enhance regional cooperation with the sense of toleration and with the sense of accommodation. And that has been a step forward to enhance regional cooperation in Central Asia. With these words, I give the floor to Dr. Rajkumar Sharma, who is a senior fellow at NetState. He was one of the foreign observers for these parliamentary elections. So over to Dr. Sharma.
My sincere thanks to Professor Ramakant Dwivedi and Professor Agarwal for having given me this opportunity to be part of this August panel, and also to His Excellency Ambassador Rustam Bhai, because this was my first experience as a relatively younger, watcher to the elections, and I've been, and I mean, this crowd is quite familiar to me because I have my educational teachers, Professor Pandey and Professor Upadhyay, who have taught me, my educational teachers, and of course my professional teachers, Ramakant sir, Ashok sir, Ambassador Geetesh Sharma, and Ambassador Skan. So I'll be sharing, my personal experiences along with what I could gather out of this, this wonderful exercise. This election was really well managed because it starts right from the Indian airport. The embassy was not only, the authorities were not only managing in Uzbekistan, but also our travel and everything. So it began right from there. And the people who are escorting us are translators, and I had a senior lecturer from Parliamentary Research Institute. They were really well informed. There was a 19-year-old boy who was my translator. He had some idea of India, but by the time he spent 3 days with me, I'll tell you right in the end what did he say about India. So this is how it all began. And of course, if you see the election, it was, as it was already highlighted, it is part of the Uzbekistan's, constitutional reforms and the strategy 2023. It has 5 pillars: economic growth, social welfare, governance, environment, and international relations. I just want to highlight it was not only the elections, that was also part of a referendum. Even the constitution that has been adopted, it was accepted by 90% of the population last year in 2023. So it has a solid basis. And apart from this, the new preamble highlights Uzbekistan as a secular country, which is very, even same India's preamble also says the same thing, that we are a secular country. So that ways we are close to, in terms of our constitutional identity, Uzbekistan and India are closer. Apart from this, there is a system of religious freedoms in Uzbekistan. Just to highlight one point, they also, established Council for Religious Affairs. And in 2018, the UN resolution on enlightenment and religious tolerance was adopted at the behest of Uzbek President Mr. Mirziyoyev. It was his personal initiative at the UN. Apart from this, as gender was highlighted, I also want to point out one more thing. Civil society is also taking roots in Uzbekistan. Just 2 examples. One is, there was involvement of almost 840 NGOs related to human rights. It continues to be in Uzbekistan. And of course, in case of women representation, it is almost 300 NGOs which promote women and gender equality in Uzbekistan. So that is another point I wanted to highlight. Ecological party, I think we missed the point because, India is one of the leaders when you come to global justice and climate justice at the global level. Maybe our political parties need to focus more on ecological issues. That can be another lesson for us. And apart from this, just 2-3 good points about the voting aspect in Uzbekistan. They have a system of early voting, by the way. That means it starts 10 days before the election, ends 3 days before. We are also looking at, some of the options for our own reforms. Voting at the place of residence is there in Uzbekistan, by the way. The people who cannot, maybe health reasons or some other reasons, they can vote from home as well. And of course, all the booths that I saw, they were disabled friendly. So, and there were, as I think Sanjay sir highlighted, there were, these first aid provisions at every booth. So that visit was quite spectacular to see. And of course, 33% of the votes are needed to participate. I mean, they need to be valid, and people need to participate, otherwise the election becomes quite invalid. And the last point that, election code, what is the role of, because I think we missed this point, the role of international observers, right? We had to observe the elections. We were free to participate in any meeting of the election commission. We could have, I went to 4 booths, so observing the election, observing early voting, and present, we can even be present during the vote count as well. So there is a lot of transparency that is coming up in the system. So my point of view was that, I just want to highlight the social contract between the government of Uzbekistan and the people is widening. What I was reading mainly from, whatever the source, and when I landed up in Uzbekistan, I saw totally different story unfolding in the country. So, I mean, it is the ATP formula that it was accountability, transparency, and participation. And I will wind up my, comments with just 2 my personal examples. When I was, in Uzbekistan, one of my friends from DU, assistant professor, she was in Taiwan. And she was constantly sending me pictures of seafood that she was being served. And when I sent her the food that I was eating, tandoori naan, tandoori chicken, fatir, almost Indian food, her comment was, "Are you in India?" I said, "No, I'm in Uzbekistan." So that is the connection that we have with Uzbekistan. And last, of course, is, when I left, I was about to leave, the 19-year-old boy who was my translator, he said, "I now know that there is so much common between India and Uzbekistan that I soon want to come." So I just welcomed him, and whenever he wants to come, most welcome. So in the end, a sincere thanks to the embassy and the election commission for having invited me here. It was a wonderful experience. Thank you.
Before I extend a vote of thanks, if any other points by the observers, sir.
I would like to add something to what Professor Pandey said. See, democracy is not an end in itself. It is a means to achieve our common goals. Nobody else is sovereign. We are sovereign. We, the people, as the preamble of our Indian Constitution says. So we, the people, are sovereign and supreme, and no other power. Number 2, just I wanted to say that we shouldn't use the word like rule. Nobody should rule us, not even a president or parliament. They are our managers. So we should say that we select or elect our government to manage our affairs and not to rule us. So this is the gist of democracy that we have to teach our youth, that we the people are sovereign, and the government doesn't rule us. They manage our affairs. They manage the affairs of our nation, or we the people. Thank you.
Any other comments?
I just had a small comment.
Please.
Based on what this Raj mentioned about that 19-year-old boy who said that he would visit India again. I had an interpreter in Samarkand, and also the gentleman who drove us around. They'd never visited India, but had a lot of love for India in their hearts, thanks to our movies and other things that they had heard about India. But the fact that when they discovered that I was a vegetarian, a strict vegetarian, they went out of the way to ensure that only vegetarian food was served, not just to me, even they insisted on having vegetarian food throughout, out of respect for their guest. And when I left that place, I told them that I've left my heart behind. So this is what it is, your countries. Thank you, Your Excellency.
You mean to say you have left your heart back in Uzbekistan?
Yes, true. I mean,
So you
out.
have to go again to bring it back.
Looks like. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. If I can just wind up the today's proceeding, that's this nature of relationship between the state and citizens, the basis of the democracy. And I would say, after listening the perspectives from the distinguished panel here, that Uzbekistan, this election has been a step forward in that direction. And it's quite heartening to listen very critical observations from all of you. Would you like to say something before I extend vote of thanks?
Just one thing, I think everybody has emphasized the role of the gender equality and the 40% thing. We are also happy that the government has passed the 33% rule, although it will come in force after 4 to 5 years, right? But it still has, it will definitely, when it has been passed, it will come, right? But good to see such a good kind of a feedback which all the guests have brought from Uzbekistan. And I think the relationships between the two countries and specifically the people to people contact will further strengthen with these kind of interactions, and more so interaction which we may have with people of Uzbekistan. And we talked about the movies, the soft power which the Indians call. I think that will bring us more closer to each other. Thank you.
So thank you. Our gratitude to each one of you for taking your time off, and gratitude to the team from the digital media, Professor Khurana Saab, who is managing the systems from behind the curtain. He's a very young person, though his age is 70 plus, but young at heart and always has been a source of inspirations. So once again, thank you and gratitude to each one of you and all the staff, those who have directly, indirectly contributed towards today's round table. So thank you very much. And as they say in Uzbek, Sizga Kattar Ahmad. Bub Khair.